All right, I said I was going to react to this, and to be real with y'all, I forgot all about it. It's been like a month, a whole month since this came out. This information about new games versus new players versus old players. Maximilian, for context, I reacted to an older video Max had that was attached to this one, which was basically, if my memory serves me correctly, old games versus new games, the changes, the difference, the likes, the dislikes of it, the arguments people have about different generations of gaming and how gaming is now, stuff like that. I did a reaction to it. You can check it out. I'm pretty sure that was what the majority of what the conversation was about. Like I said, it's been a while. This new one, or the latest one on this subject, was a month ago, so that'll tell you how long it's been. But I did say I wanted to see the part two of it, which basically is new players now versus old players. Maximilian always has interesting conversations when it comes to gaming, and I'm always intrigued and I listen to it and pay attention because, I mean, he's an OG. He knows a lot more than I do. I think I know pretty nice amount when it comes to not just fighting games, but gaming in general. But when it comes to fighting games and the details of him breaking it down with his opinion, it's something I really respect. So I'm curious to see what he's going to talk about here. Is it going to be about separation of players of back then to now with the new players versus old players? You know, because there's a lot of, well, back in my day, it was like this. It should be like this because when I played back then, there is a lot of that now. And in my opinion, some of those people are right. It's some, some are wrong. There are things that was, in my opinion, there are some things that once was that should still be now. And there are some things I see that are now, that is happening now, that is actually working well. I believe there's a middle ground. I don't really pick sides when it comes to the opinions of old gamers versus new gamers. The argument could probably last just as long as the argument of who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron. Well, back in the day, Michael Jordan dealt with this, well, LeBron deals with this. It's an ongoing, argument or debate, you want to say. And for me personally, I'm the kind of guy that's in the middle. And that's it. I'm just assuming this is what he's going to talk about when it comes to old players versus new players. But that is a subject that a lot of gamers, I mean, not just in video games, but other stuff like in sports or movies or whatever, that is always in debate conversations. Well, it should be like this because back in the day, and then the newcomers are like, well, ours are better because. So I'm interested in seeing where he goes with it with this, but just looking at the title, it seems like that's what the conversation is going to be about.
There's so many newer players that are able to be good. Effectively, new players would not have been good at the old games because old games were harder. There was actual execution.
That is true.
I see from either end where it's like, well, that isn't exactly fair, like yada, yada, yada. I got to bring it back to what I was just talking about. The thing that I have to remind myself when I go back to the early 2000s and I was learning to be like really good at some shit was that we didn't have information. Sometimes you just didn't know how things worked. And the ability for you to acquire said information is difficult, much less the ability for you to even have access to the fucking game itself. Be reminded that we did not have an effective good version of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike until 2005.
That is true. That's a really good point.
Most people, when they played games like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, were playing the wrong versions of it on PS2 and shit. We didn't even have the ability.
One thing that is a blessing now is the accessibility of learning a game. It's much easier now than it used to be back then. It took a lot of just you playing trial and error and learning frame drop, all that stuff just from playing it. Now, it's a long list. I don't even want to go through the whole thing, but it is a whole lot better. And so, yeah, that's a really good point. Thinking about when he said that, I'm like, dang, yeah, learning a fighting game, like when I played Marvel's Capcom 2 back in the day, it was just me playing it and just having to go through the hours and hours of trial and error and learning when I'm safe, when I'm not, all that. Where now you can play a fighting game and you go to the training room, and for most fighting games, and they show you the frame, they show you the timing, they show you this and that, and I like that.
To go into training mode for a lot of these games, being relegated to just jamming quarters in machines and just hoping that,
that you
maybe
figure
the
it
things
out.
I learned in a funky-ass PS1 version is going to translate to the arcade. I think the comparison of yes, you're right. Execution has gotten easier. Duh. Like, we can all see that.
Okay.
Fighting game devs want more people to have access to do cool shit.
Right,
Even
they want
new
more people to
players
play.
will agree that that shit's true. But at the same time, not giving people, like, nowadays that are really good at this shit the benefit of the doubt that if you were back then, why do you think that they would not have also been able to figure this shit out? Different skill sets have changed. Now it's more about, like, really reading your opponent instead of the execution behind it. And that's just kind of the way fighting games have moved over the years. But at the same point, it's like, if they put in just as much friggin' time as you did, would that have worked out back in the day? We don't have the answers for that, man. It's like, okay, maybe not.
I was just about to say, I don't know.
But to be real, I've mentioned this a couple of times about being good at fighting games in arcade days. If you're over the age of 30 and you have a big specific memory of arcade fighting games, you wanted to get better at them, so you found something that's like deceptively good. Back in the day, we called these moves that had priority. Right? Frame data didn't even exist in our minds for the most part. We didn't have enough information for that stuff that wasn't wildly available. So you just found the moves that had the best priority and were the most cheesy you could possibly do. So most of the games were based on a feel, and you would just find the shit that is just like really good, and then suddenly you will just wipe the floor with people. Somebody's going to ask you, hey, how did you do that? Are you going to share that information with them while you're currently on like your 10-game win streak?
Probably not.
And
No.
6 other people are
Back in the
behind
day,
you to play?
I wouldn't.
Fuck no, dude.
As long as it took for me to figure that out, I would let my opponent figure it out.
Knowing what we knew about how fighting games worked was not wildly available. Like, it was fairly limited. So even in those moments, right, the amount of people that were actually sharing information was limited. I'm going to break down how it's way different now than it was way different then. As somebody that was an up-and-coming Third Strike player, it was my destiny, right? I was putting everything into this. I practiced every single day. I was going to arcades. I was trying to find the best players. I was actively going out of my way to find competition to be good at. I had a problem. I was running out of competition. Couldn't find other people at times that were as good as the game. And it was making me mad to the point where if you wanted to go out and hunt down top level players, that wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy thing to look up even footage and information of other top level players and how they play to see what strategies they're coming up with. You didn't have that. I wanted to find out how to get better at this stuff, and I hit a brick wall where suddenly the only way I'm going to be able to do this is to find people that know other people. When do they show up here? When is there going to be a tournament or a...
There, I have an attachment to that, what he just said. GameWorks. I don't know if y'all heard of that place, but it was a place I grew up, an arcade spot that I grew up around. I don't even know if it's still hanging out to this day, but GameWorks at Great Lakes Mall in Michigan. I remember that. Wow, that's crazy how I still remember that. But there was a certain time on Saturdays that had Marvel vs. Capcom 2 where these elite type players would play. And by the way, when I won the tournament for Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I wasn't striving for that. That was because my brother threw me in the pile. That was not on purpose. But I still wanted to see the skill set that I had compared to somebody else. Am I as good as I think I am? Do I have a long way to go to learn? All this other stuff. And GameWorks had this in Michigan, had this certain time where it was these 4 or 5 guys. I can't remember how many it was, but I think it was 4 or 5. And they would just be around Marvel's Capcom 2. And it was, I'll tell you, these guys definitely showed you where you was at. And I wasn't the best one in that room. I was pretty good, but I wasn't the best one in that room. But like how he was saying, how he was finding competition so you can get better and learn about yourself. That was me. That was GameWorks, and shout out to that place. I don't even know if they're still running now, but GameWorks, Michigan, and Great Lakes Mall. That was my story for what he's saying there. You know, because you can't really find I was invested in that fighting game more than any other fighting game. That's why when it came to Tekken and other ones, I was okay. Because I put more time in Marvel's Capcom 2. But I couldn't find any other place where people was taking it to the seriousness that I was. Except that one place. And sometimes I'll be there, sometimes I wouldn't. It'd be up to my parents if they let me go there because I was young. But yeah, it was a certain time on Saturdays at GameWorks. That's crazy. I'm just talking about it. I had a flashback.
brand bat or something going down, I have to go there and watch people do this shit.
Yeah.
I need to get an old SBO DVD to see what the hell did somebody do in CVS2. Like, what the hell is going on?
And that's the thing. You couldn't like my day. Like when I was a kid, ain't no phones or recorders and stuff. So it was all mental memory. That was the one thing that back in the day of fighting games and players like, not just me, but players like myself, we had to work hard because we also just had to remember what we saw, remember what we dealt with. And, you know, now you can have recorders and YouTube and all this other stuff, which is cool. That's why I said I'm in the middle of the old and new, because what worked, you know, some things that worked in the old, you know, back in the day can work now, but there's a lot of things in the new that can definitely help upgrade to learn the game better. But I don't know. Sorry, I gave y'all that. Well, I'm not sorry, but I gave y'all a story because he just put me down memory lane.
Go out of your way
it's funny
to
just
find
to hear
this
somebody
information.
what they was
the
going
best
through
hope you
back in the
had
day,
was that
I just had a memory.
somebody on SRK wanted to share that with you, but most of the time that was not the case, man. People didn't want to share that.
No,
I would argue
I've
back
had
in
nobody
the
share
early
anything with me.
2000s, there was absolutely what almost felt like an out of the bubble, conscious effort from the top level fighting game players.
You had to put
hold
effort.
that
If
shit.
you didn't put the
There was
time
almost a
in, then
conscious
you're
effort
gonna lose. All
of
well.
them to sort of stay in a sort of focused group and keep that information gated so that no other people really knew about it. The best people were only playing the other best people, and they had no interest in playing people outside of that for the most part. It felt like it was actively hard to become better. What's different about that than it is today? Well, today, now you have everything. I almost have to give modern players a bit of credit today, because it almost feels like these people were undefeatable back in the day. And the only people that were able to defeat them was when you got into tournaments and they were only fighting each other, right?
That's it.
It was a very, very, very small pool of people that were actually good at these fighting games at the top level. But now you get people that show up from like the middle of nowhere and suddenly they're mad good. How did they get access to a skill set, to a player base that was so good at the game to put them on that level and elevate them? Well, there's online. There's information everywhere. There's people here. There's people there. People can just literally rank up to a point in an online fighting game and only fight against other people that are mad good. So I don't think it's really fair to compare whether or not these current players can match the skill of players from back in the day. Because back in the day, access to information, much less access to skilled players, you could only do it if you went to a tournament, you fought them, and you made your way out there.
And you hope they show up there too, because you could be there. I had that happen to me sometimes, where my parents was very nice enough to send me to the spot, and sometimes they didn't show up, and I'm there by myself again. So it was a hit or miss. Like now, the accessibility of getting better. I told somebody, it's not just in fighting games, but in games in general. There's really no excuse to not get better at a game now than there's ever been. I mean, because it's a lot better now than there's ever been. And the accessibility, the time. If you want to get better, you just have to put the time in. Because at the end of the day, you still got to put time to get better, and something like that doesn't go away. It's just back in the day we had to put overtime. You know, now, because all the information that's available now was not even close to available back then. Like he just said, and then the people who had some of the information, they didn't want to share it because they're going to face you. And if you know it, they're going to, you can counter them. So, and plus, I remember somebody told me this, he was like, as hard as it was to find this information, you think I'm just going to easily give it to somebody else? No, it's a competition. He's like, figure it out yourself. And you got to respect it. It's not toxic. I see his point. Because at the end of the day, it's still 1v1, so you don't want to give your opponent an edge.
Do it. What do you need to, if you want to be good at Tekken, what do you need to do? Oh, just eventually get to purple ranks, get to Tekken God ranks, and you'll start fighting people that are good. The available folks that are going to be mad good at the game are going to be up there. So you just stay home, and what do? You play. You grind the shit out of these games. Look up information. You look up match charts. You have an infinite amount of resources to work with. So to me, the comparable skill is different. The amount of people that it isn't just that the games are getting like easier to play and whatnot. In fact, nowadays, I feel like it's even harder to be good at fighting games, which is what a lot of, I'd say, more professional players are saying, that it's harder to be good at fighting games because I'd say the skill pool seems to be getting bigger and bigger.
So many
I find
more
a
now.
lot of these like conversations, instead of it just boiling down to something as like simple as this, I prefer to look to it as like a bigger picture. and just like compare what we had access to. We didn't even have fucking arcade sticks, man. Like we had to learn multiple controller methods just to like be good at games and stuff. And now like everything's everywhere. So I kind of really respect the folks that are good now because they are playing the shit out of these games. They're playing the holy shit out of them. And that's kind of the answer I have to give you, where it's like, hey, how do I get good at fighting games? I mean, to be real, nowadays, it isn't about finding some cheesy strategy and just repeating it over and over again until you know, get absolutely blown up and it doesn't work anymore. Nowadays, you get past green ranks and all of a sudden, everyone starts blocking your fucking lows. Just using Tekken as an example, right? So really, modern fighting games force you to like evolve and get better much faster. The games themselves give you enough like offensive tools to sort of like break past that, but really, the best players usually show up, you know? In most of these fighting games, who are the best Street Fighter 6 players? The Street Fighter 5 players? Who's likely going to be the best Tekken 8 players? Most likely the Tekken 7 players. We don't have answers for all of this stuff yet to see like where exactly Tekken is going to go and all this shit, much less Street Fighter 6. We already have a pretty good idea. I don't think people realize how good we have it right now. And there's like a lot of complaining. You know? I feel like there is so much complaining at the moment about where fighting games are at, and it feels in some ways, from the perspective of people that really like this shit, it almost feels like they're at their worst. And to me, it kind of feels like we're at the best.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, dude, there are so many.
The way
like,
I feel,
really
I told
good
somebody
fighting-
this. I told somebody this not even that long ago. I said it's the complaining when it comes to this stuff is probably never going to end, because it don't matter how you do it, who you please, how you please them with this stuff. There's always something to complain about. And I'm sorry, not legit in a legit complaint, but there's always somebody, some group that's going to complain about something. And if you look at, and he just said it, if you look at the whole picture of fighting games, we're at the best that we've ever been, in my opinion. The variety of it, the different play styles, the adjustments to them. Is there little nicks you could change? Sure. But if you look at the whole plate of the whole table of fighting games, we're the best we've ever been. And sitting here complaining is only going to bring it back. I mean, well, not really. If the developers and stuff don't listen to you, those complaints, you know, then we're in good terms. And I'm not saying every complaint is wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. Those type of people where no matter what you do, there's a fault. There's a fault. And then you look at the fault, it's like, no, it's not a fault. You're just not good at the game. You know, most of the time. It's a lot of those times like, oh, look at, I couldn't get this. This character, this is overpowered, yada, yada, yada. Then you play it, you're like, you're just not good at the game. And that's fine. We all got to grow. I got a lot of growing in what I'm doing, to everybody do. You know, but yeah, I agree with him. There's been a lot of complaining. But that's just the world we live in. Any kind of game, you know, it seems like no matter what FIFA does, there's a complaint. No matter what Call of Duty does, no matter whatever game that you play, there's always something wrong. It's never just, thank you for this content, let's make it better, you know, without sitting here being toxic about it.
Tekken is going to go and all this shit, much less Street Fighter 6. We already have a pretty good idea. I don't think people realize how good we have it right now. And there's like a lot of
we have it really very good.
You know? I feel like there is so much complaining at the moment about where fighting games are at, and it feels in some ways, from the perspective of people that really like this shit, it almost feels like they're at their worst. And to me, it kind of feels like we're at the best.
We are.
To me, it's like, dude, there are so many like really good fighting games that are legit super good, and
they're all different types. So if you're not feeling the Mortal Kombat type, Street Fighter 6, you're not feeling that type, Tekken, if you're not feeling that type, Grand Blue, if you're not feeling that type, Birth. It's so many. I mean, Smash Bros. I don't play Smash Bros, but Smash Bros, whatever. There's so many different versions of different ways to play. So at the end of the day, if none of them pleases you, then it's just you. It's not the game. It's not the fighting games are terrible. No, it's just you. And that's fine. It's just not your thing, I guess.
Worst. And to me, it kind of feels like we're at the best. To me, it's like, dude, there are so many like really good fighting games that are legit super good and look amazing. And a lot of them play incredibly online. And a lot of them are getting things like crossplay and shit. Way more information access inside the games than even ever before. I've been actively following and actively pursuing this genre professionally for 13 to 15 years, casually, competitively following it for 10 years before that, and then just, you know, an absolute noob just hitting buttons early in the 90s and shit. But to be real, like, it almost feels like we're in a better spot right now, just in terms of the entire genre, than we were in the 90s.
He's
it's
right.
so good right now, it's insane. I understand complaints, but I also can echo a sentiment that seems very, very, very active since Street Fighter 6, the shifting of communities from previous games to new games, and as well as Tekken. There is so much complaining.
Yes.
There is an aggressive amount of complaining, and not even like complaining for a critical sort of reason. Some of it is
that's
like,
what I'm saying, not legit
maybe a
complaints.
game isn't as good as the previous game and we are demanding better quality. But some of it comes from a point where the game is really good. There's really not much wrong with it, and there still is an insane amount of complaining. I think that's something that developers are going to have to really focus on and tackle. Because the difference now is that it isn't about where the games are currently at the moment. It's more about where they're going to go. And we don't know the future. And we don't know what their plans are for like games like Street Fighter 6, as well as even Mortal Kombat and Tekken 8. It's going to change. Things will change. Things won't be as insane as they are right now. All I got to say with this entire situation is sort of like more broad stroke. I take a few steps back and I'm like, I kind of feel like we have it better than we ever have been. And just to take myself out of this situation, my viewership in terms of, you know, content that I make, just to compare, is significantly worse. Just overall. Why is it worse? Because there's so many other experts in the field now making content for all of these games. This isn't a, oh, fighting, we got new fighting games, there's new audiences, there's a ton of people watching, I'm making money, right? It's actually the opposite in most situations, where the viewership I have on videos ever since the pandemic happened has gone down because more people are making content than ever before. More people aren't being professional fighting game players. These gods at these games are just focusing making content and stuff. Again, another broad stroke. Oh, I just want new games so I can make more money. No, I truly feel that fighting games are better than they ever have been right now. I truly feel that way.
He's right.
Old game versus new game too. New Age of Discourse.
He's right. I mean, he kind of wrapped it up right there. I mean, he was right. So, let me know what you feel about it. But I said it before. I said it last year. I said we are in a great time right now with fighting games. And now we got Sparking Zero coming out. I mean, we got 2K, which I'm so looking forward to. Was it 2XKO or 2KXO? No, I think it's 2XKO, the Riot game. I am looking forward to that. We got Fatal Fury. There's just so many types. I mean, there's way too many. Not way too many in a bad way, but there's a lot of options, a lot of different play styles. And I mean, I've been posting a lot of Grand Blue because I'm trying to get people to notice that game. That's a great fighting game. I mean, to the detail, the fighting style, the animation, the character. I didn't know Grand Blue was ever a thing. I just learned about it in December, and I'm glad somebody introduced me to it. But now I want to introduce it more to people because just like how I didn't know, there's a lot of other people who didn't know that Grand Blue's been around for a long time. But this new game that came out in December, very, very good. Check it out. But yeah, I think he was right. There's nothing more else for me to say. So thank y'all so much for tuning in. Let me know how you feel about what he said, and I'll put the full video in the description below. Shout out to Max. Let me make sure I give a like. Bam. There we go. All right. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. I'll check you later.